This time on Engine Masters, we're gonna find out how Steve Dulcich home ported a set of cylinder heads to make big, stinky power for free. This is Engine Masters presented by AMSOIL and sponsored by Mr. Gasket and Earl's Vapor Guard Plumbing. Now this time, it's gonna be pretty interesting because we're gonna take an engine and we're not gonna change any parts on it. But what we are gonna do is completely hog out and port the intake manifold and the cylinder heads and find out how much more power we make with just a little bit of elbow grease. Now, this engine should be familiar if you're a fan of Engine Masters. It's the same one that we did in that Ford versus Mopar Stroker shootout episode a while back. And you'll remember in that episode, we complained a lot about the fact that the Mopar here lost that competition basically because the cylinder heads don't flow very well for an engine at 410 cubic inches. So we're out to solve that. Now, what this is a long block from Blueprint Engines. You can buy it for about $5,300 and it comes with a front cover and an oil pan and a camshaft. Pretty good deal. The camshaft that's in it is a hydraulic flat tappet. It's 241, 247 at 50 thousandths tappet lift. That means that is a pretty big hydraulic flat tappet camshaft. This thing should RPM, but it doesn't because it doesn't flow much air. These are an out-of-the-box Edelbrock cylinder head. Now, Edelbrock has recently introduced a Victor head that is much more bitchin' than these. But what we're gonna show you here is how Dulcich took a set of these heads and made them better just with a little bit of handwork. Now, what's different since the last time we ran this engine is two things. First, the rocker arm ratio in here. We've changed it to a 1.6-to-1 ratio roller rocker, so it's got a little bit more lift. It used to have 1.5-to-1, which is stock. Also, when we ran this before, it had a dual plane intake manifold, which favors low end torque. We've now got a big ol' Super Victor single plane on it that is probably gonna run pretty bad and kill a lot of low end torque compared to the last time we ran this engine. But the whole point is, it's gonna be a scientific A/B test of the exact same components before and after home porting. So now let's go hang a thing on the dyno, pour some oil in it, we're gonna fire it up, see how bad we killed the torque curve with this intake manifold before we make it heroically better with a bunch of ported parts. My prediction is that when we swap to this intake manifold, we probably killed a whole lot of torque, and it's probably not gonna make any more horsepower, and it's probably not gonna make any more RPM. So this thing's basically still a tame street engine, but when we put the ported stuff on there, I'm hoping this thing will scream. And because of that, we're gonna use the Dominator racing oil. We're gonna throw the 1030 in this thing. This is what AMSOIL has recommended to us for this engine. Even though we've had the premium protection in it before, we're trying to step it up a little bit. Oh, check this out. See this white stuff that just came off of the valve cover grommet? That might freak you out because it looks like the kind of milkshake that happens when you get water in oil. But we often see that on the dyno. We get a little bit of condensation in here when it's cold in the morning and stuff, and it just sort of burns off. We let the AMSOIL do the lube and not the coolant. The long pour is back. I've still got it. Oh, I failed. I failed worse than ever. The reason that we've got this mishmash of components is that we wanted a clean A/B test to compare with the ported intake and heads that Dulcich has. And that's what he used as an Edelbrock Super Victor big single plane. So.
Yeah, that's the match set, so we had to make this same component setup,
yeah.
Right?
So this is gonna be humiliating, but run it.
I bet you it'll still make more top end power than it did before.
No? I don't think so. I think the head is a limiting factor.
Sometimes when you saturated the head, that's just all
you
there
get.
is.
Yeah.
Can't get there from here.
You don't make one side any better, you make the other side a lot worse.
Yeah. It's like taking the freeway and necking it down to one lane. That's what that cylinder head's doing. Got the coolant up to temp, oil's hot.
Ready?
Let it rip.
Here we go.
you see, Dulcich?
440 horsepower.
Okay, so that's up 5. But wait till you see the torque.
448 pound-feet out of a 408-inch motor.
That's not very good torque.
Let's see what we got. Not even a very pretty curve.
No.
And that's valve float.
It's into some sort of distress. It hasn't completely crashed yet, but it's not happy there.
What we just saw is that it made 438.7 horsepower at 5,500 RPM and 448.2 pound-feet of torque at 4,700. Just out of curiosity, I've got to see this curve laid over the one from the earlier episode where we had the dual plane intake manifold.
And the survey says,
oh! So this is horrible, and what we predicted. The red line is the prior test with a dual plane intake manifold. This black line is the single plane we've got on it now. You can see that big, tall race manifold killed all of the torque and power in the world. The real question to me is when we get more airflow through it, are we gonna take the RPM points at peak power and move them up?
Yeah, sure.
And do you think that the torque will stay at the same RPM and that the horsepower will be at a higher RPM?
I think it could shift the whole thing up a bit with the ported head, larger head. And when I said a bigger head or bigger intake, it really is, we're probably going to see some torque improvement because of just, it's an improved cylinder head, not necessarily just bigger.
Either that or you completely screwed it up and it's going to be a disaster.
It might be. You want to know why?
Why?
Because with that setup, you're depending on a higher RPM to make the additional power.
And your valve train might not hold it
Well,
together.
it's not the valve train, it's the hydraulic lifter cam. When you do a really high RPM motor, what do you want? You want a solid roller, or you want a really,
At least
really
a
good
solid flat
hydraulic, or you want a solid flat tappet. But
And this is a hydraulic flat
Engine
tappet.
speed's the key to the upgrade in cylinder heads
Yeah.
and intake. So we're going to have to...
Less talking, more
Wrenching?
ported heads being installed.
yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
I'm hedging. Am I making excuses here?
Now we're gonna get into the cylinder head porting goodness, but first, we were talking so much about the torque curve in there, about how much better this engine was before we put the big single plane intake manifold.
And killed all
Killed all the power. I just wanted to show people, this is the manifold we had on that engine before. It's a dual plane, it has longer runners. These things clearly make way more torque than the race type single plane intake manifold. But what we're really after here is looking at how much we can improve those parts that we just had on the engine. So we're not changing anything, we're just modifying the intake manifold and cylinder heads that we just ran in that dyno test. Now, cylinder head porting, or intake manifold porting, is just going in here, reshaping, restyling, usually enlarging the runners that deliver the air and fuel into the engine, because the more air and fuel you can get in there, the more power you make. So Steve probably spent about a week and a half of his life, and Bryce on this intake manifold. Steve didn't do this one, he did the heads. With what's called a die grinder, and you can get stones for them, or cutters, or sandpaper rolls, and go in there and just really carefully reshape all of this stuff. The intake manifold has just enlargement, or do you think there's other modifications? He's knife-edged some of the port transitions.
Yeah,
and
there's
stuff.
a lot more to it than you can tell just by a casual look, but really you quantify how good you're doing by testing on a flow bench like at the back of this shop right here.
Or a dyno.
Yeah, or a dyno, even better. But that tells you if this thing is actually flowing more air than when you started.
So that's it with the intake manifold. Now moving on to the cylinder heads, these are not only ported, but Steve also did a trick to make the port window larger. What'd you do?
Well, the thing is, with any inline valve engine, the push rod's going to present a restriction to the intake port width because it pretty much cuts through in the casting right where the ports are. So you can't go any wider than that unless you move the push rod out of the way. And actually, Chrysler started doing this back in the 70s on their race heads like the W2, and that's what I patterned this after. And I filled out the original push rod hole, moved it over to the W2 location, allowing a much wider port, and a bigger port, and a higher flowing port.
You can really see the difference in the port size on those things. And what's neat is he did all of this at home. This is taking the same exact parts that we just dyno tested and hopping them up. I like that you made this epoxy matrix of aluminum shavings and JB Weld to fill the old holes. and then he made a fixture to drill a new pushrod hole, and also put a larger intake valve. It's 208 instead of 202, and he ported the exhaust side as well. So the thing is, you can buy an aftermarket head that has this type of modification already done to it. Edelbrock's got a new Victor series head that's done this way. Indy sells a bunch of them. The ancient Mopar Performance W2, W5 heads are the same way. But this is what Steve did basically just with elbow grease and ingenuity and a lot of time. So it shows you what you can actually accomplish in your own garage if you put the time and skill into it.
Yeah, plus I already had the head, so just a little grinder work, and hopefully it'll make more horsepower. Don't know about that yet.
Free is better than good? Is that what you were thinking?
Yeah.
So that's a whole lot of work if it doesn't make more power. So we're gonna go bolt it all on and find out.
My anxiety level is through the freaking roof.
I know, he always gets so worked up. So what's happening now is because he's enlarged the port so much and they don't make an aftermarket gasket, he's gonna take a stock gasket and port it so that it fits these.
That's right.
This is not normal procedure for an intake manifold gasket. He's doing this so that he can affix it to the head, which will make it easier to hack. The other thing Steve didn't show you before is that this intake manifold bolt also had to be moved because when it's over here, it goes into the pushrod hole, right?
Right.
Or it would have gone into it after you moved the pushrod hole, so he had to move the intake manifold bolt over as well. That's the type of stuff when you're really going all out with backyard hot rodding, you sometimes have a domino effect of stuff you need to do.
But that's the way it used to be done back in the day. I mean, people didn't buy performance, they'd made performance by experimenting and cutting and changing and machining and hacking and hot rodding, right?
I'm thinking this episode is not so much about, you know, hey, go hog the stuff, but it's just an example of the mad scientist stuff you can do in hot rodding to make stuff good.
No.
Oh man.
The best thing about this test is watching him squirm.
I know, it's not about the power.
No,
it's really about that.
Not at this point.
I feel like a hog on its way to slaughter.
So I think we all agree this is going to make more horsepower, right? It can't
As long
not.
as we have some engine speed.
The problem is we discovered out there that the lifters bleed down really easily. Brule was lashing the valves and you could just collapse the lifters like with one finger.
Yeah, it's a little scary, even with the good springs and lighter retainers and stuff.
We about there? You want to run it?
We're good.
How do you feel, Steve?
Great. In the words of Tony Tiger. Yeah.
Dude!
That's 100 horsepower up, dude.
100 horsepower gain! Let's look at the actual numbers, but it's somewhere around there. So our final number, 530.8 horsepower at 6,400 RPM, and the torque peak, 488 pound-feet at 5,200. And again, if we go down here at 3,800, which is where it peaked with the old cylinder heads, it's still right there within 5 numbers. So the overlay tells you that this is absolutely worthwhile, and Dulcich looks like a superhero.
Will you port heads for me?
I don't really port heads for anybody except Freiberger these days. And my stuff.
What was your mobile number?
Wow. Okay, well, let's go wrap up this show and make you look like a superhero.
I'm already feeling pretty happy.
He is a superhero.
Oh, Brule, thanks.
How do you feel?
Good.
I know.
Because the motor's good now.
That was great. This legit the biggest win in the history of the show.
You think so?
Completely.
And it could
because 92 horsepower with nothing but manual labor, and it took this engine that was making like 435 and turned it into, what did it make, 539 or something?
Yeah, something like that. It was pretty good.
And you did it.
Oh,
That's
dude.
what makes it really cool.
It wasn't all me. My buddy Bryce Mulvey, he did the intake manifold.
Yeah.
And he did do the valve job and a little bit of tuning up on my port work, but
still, it just shows what's possible. And I would like to say that anybody who's watching the show could get the same results home porting their heads, But that just isn't true. It takes a lot of skill. This isn't Steve's first set of heads. But the lesson is buy the best cylinder heads you can. It is completely worth it. And there are a bunch of small block Mopar heads on the market that can probably match or beat this, and they're available on the Edelbrock Victor series, which is new.
Right.
And Indy Cylinder Heads makes a few versions of the same thing where the push rod's moved out of the way and it uses different rockers and stuff. Big stroker engine, completely worth it.
Yeah, that's what I always say. If you've got the cubes, make sure you've got the airflow to feed them.
This episode made Steve look like a superhero. And that was really the whole point of this episode of Engine Masters.
Yeah. I wanted to test my theory of gravity. You know, Sir Isaac Newton proved the theory of gravity in like 1720s.
What hits the ground faster, an aluminum head or an iron head?
I know which one hurts more.